So I am running for Congress for a variety of reasons, and number one reason being I want to continue to serve my country. And the reason I say that is 2 months ago I just wrapped up a 35-year career in the Marine Corps, Reserve and Active Duty. It was 35 years, 1 month, and 25 days. That's how much I enjoyed it. I didn't really want to go, but it was my time to go. You can only do 30 years commission as a colonel. And so it was my time to go, and that's why I'm running. I think there's a lot of problems in Washington, D.C., a lot of dysfunction. I'm not used to dysfunction. In addition to being a career Marine in the Reserve and Active, I also am a small businessman in that I employ individuals at my law firm. I'm a patent and trademark attorney. My wife's a small businesswoman as well. And we have 2 daughters, 18 and 13, Catherine and Grace. And I just look at them, I look at the business community on Main Street, I look at Washington, and I feel they're out of touch. I think our current Congresswoman is out of touch. She hasn't done any town halls. Everywhere I go, people are wondering, where is she? We haven't talked to her. Not my kind of style. I don't think it's the style of what a elected official should do. I think there are a lot of career politicians down in Washington, D.C. thinking about themselves rather than about the country. And you may have seen my pledge. I don't mean to go on and on, but the whole key, I think, to why I'm running is the pledge that I've come up to, which is a Wake Up Washington pledge, which is term limits. They've got to happen. I'm going to term limit myself to 3 terms, if the voters would have me that long. I think all members of Congress should be limited to 3 terms. I'm an advocate for an amendment to the Constitution on that. I don't think Congress should get a pay raise. If one is offered to me, I will refuse it or give it to charity. I don't think as an elected official you deserve a pension, so I'm going to refuse a pension. I'm going to advocate for eliminating the pension program for Congress. I don't think Congress should get paid if they don't pass a budget. And I don't believe in taxpayer-funded mass mailings. And you will not see any from me if elected. So, I know that was a long version as to why I'm running, but those are the principles of why I believe I make an effective congressman and why I think I can do a better job than the current person there right now.
Well, I'm going to jump in and start talking about guns.
Yep.
And I know that you're a lifetime member of the NRA, so we have probably some predictable responses as to how you feel about gun owner rights. But maybe we could talk a little bit about gun control measures. Mm-hmm. This Congress has not passed any significant gun control measure in 20 years. Yet gun violence and gun-related death rates are trending up. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you can imagine by way of a legislative response or some common sense approaches to making all of us safer without infringing on those rights of gun owners?
Yeah, I think we've got a mental health issue with respect to guns, and I've been on the board of the National Mental Health Center. So I have a kind of a feel as to mental health issues in America. And if you take a look at these mass killings, the ones that at least make the press, if you look far enough, you're going to see signs of mental illness along the way somewhere. And we've got to find a way to prevent these folks that are mentally ill, that will cause violence either to themselves or to others from getting those type of guns. And number 2, we need to enforce the laws currently in the books. I mean, if you take Chicago, which is the #1 homicide city in America, right? No firearms allowed in the city, right? Or at least no handguns of any type. Well, that's what they're killing each other with. So why can't we enforce those laws? Why can't we put people behind bars that need to be put behind bars, and why can't we keep guns away from mentally ill? Because I'll be honest with you, I mean, you're right, I'm a lifetime member of the NRA, member of the National Fish and Game Association, which is a shooting club, sports shooting club. The folks on the gun line with me, on the firing line, are all law-abiding citizens and won't harm a fly, unless they had to, unless it's self-defense purposes. So, you know, why we would want to limit a law-abiding citizen when we've got so many problems in other places, I don't see the reason.
Do you consider our laws on the books regarding background checks as going far enough?
I think we have background checks. I think we have sufficient background checks. Let's face it, I bought my share of weapons and firearms, and I've always had to go through one. I've had to fill out the forms, and then that goes in, and You're checked on, somebody checks you. So we've got background checks. Now, I think what we need to do is make sure, if someone falsely states the qualifications on that form, they need to be prosecuted. They need to be enforced, okay? So if you've got a mental illness, you've been under the treatment of a psychiatrist, whatever, and you check the block, no, I don't. I've never been mentally ill or seen a psychiatrist or a psychologist, whatever we want to come up with. I think those folks that have lied under oath need to be taken to task.
Well, we have background checks that relate to licensed gun sellers, but we don't necessarily for all unlicensed gun shows and such, trade shows, gun shows. Do we need to?
Well, if you go to a lot of those gun shows, most of the folks in there are licensed dealers. Guess what? They've got to do a background check. So I know everybody's talking about the gun shows, but having been to my share of gun shows, I can tell you that the average person there is a gun dealer from a gun shop. And yeah, if I would like, I'll be honest with you, if I would like to sell a rifle to my next door neighbor, and I know he's a law-abiding citizen, I should be able to sell my rifle to my next door neighbor. So I don't think that's where the problem lies.
Sorry, I wonder if I could ask you to expand a little bit on dealing with the problem of guns in the hands of mentally ill people.
Mm-hmm.
How do you come up with some regimen to deal with that? And maybe you're marching in that direction about if you're seeing a psychiatrist, then that's but there's a lot of talk about dealing with the mentally ill, but there's no specifics in here as to exactly how that might occur.
Well, I don't profess to be an expert on that. My only connection with mental illness is through the 2 years I served on the board at the National Mental Health Center. I'm sure there's plenty of good ideas out there, and I'm willing to listen to them, so I don't have an exact plan, but I can tell you from just a novice looking at the news that the folks committing these crimes, the guys killing their wife and their children, those are mentally ill people. So what do we, I think there's plenty of ideas out there. I'm willing to listen to those ideas. How do we keep that guy or gal from grabbing that gun and killing their family? And it's not by taking away the weapon. I mean, you could, but that man or woman will find a knife to kill their family. So I think we need to get to the root of the problem. I hate to sound with a soundbite here, but guns do not kill people. People do. That's been said ever since I can remember joining the NRA to even now, and it's the truth. That's why the statement works.
Switching gears to immigration, I was hoping you could speak to any of your thoughts on the current situation at the border and also just immigration in the general sense.
Well, my mother's an
Just to
immigrant.
clarify, we're talking about the Mexico.
Oh, I didn't think you were Canadian, right. I didn't think you were thinking about Pittsburgh. My mother's an immigrant, and I just remember the story she told me about how difficult it was to come to this country, to get a sponsor in this country, to stay in this country, etc. So, I'm a first generation American with respect to my mom. With respect to the border down there, I think we've got a big problem with border security, and I think we need to secure the border. I think everybody's worried or walking around with their hair on fire, worried about the symptoms rather than the cure. So I think we need to secure the border first. That's what we got to talk about first. And I think there's 3 ways at least of doing that. We can put fencing up in the appropriate places. We can put aviation assets up in the air, like drones, etc. And I think we need boots on the ground where necessary. National Guard, whoever we decide. But I think if you can do a combination of those things, maybe even more, we can secure the border. And after that, now we've got to make sure we send a very, very clear message that, look, you can't come to America and expect to get amnesty. You can't come to get the free ride. The reason why we have a problem on the border, people coming to the border, we've sent this message that if you come, we will take you in, and you may become a citizen or attain legal status. So I think that message has to be very loud and clear. No amnesty.
Is this a high priority issue for you?
I tell you what, it's a high priority issue for the folks out there that I talk to most nights. So the only priority issues for me are what's the priority for the voters I talk to. And I will tell you that comes up, because I'm normally out every night at some GOP meeting, group of people. I try to be around as many people as I can. That comes up all the time. So it's a high priority to me.
How does, in what ways would the United States send the message to people? I know we had a policy from the Reagan administration that does involve the amnesty piece, and what do we do about that? How do we send the message to people?
Well, we can start with the president. His message is very mixed at best. In fact, I think he's considering now doing some type of executive amnesty. At least that's the message I get from watching him speak. Well, that has to be turned around, and it has to be very clear. Look, you know, we're securing the border, and there will be no amnesty. So why bother coming? You know, you can come. I mean, it's not that I'm opposed to immigration. Remember, I'm a I would not be here right now if my mother hadn't immigrated to this country. But it was legal. It was through a sponsor. They went to work on a farm. My mother went to work in a textile mill right away, because the name of the game was, if you failed, your sponsor had to pick you up. And they were too proud to let the sponsor pick them up if they failed. So they worked extra hard. Her and my grandfather worked extra hard to make sure they made it. They survived.
Taking that experience of your mother, and in terms of looking at legal immigration itself right now, I know there's been talk through the years about the system and hoops people have to jump through and stuff. Do you see that at least the legal side of immigration needing reform at all, or what's your take on that?
I think that we have to look at immigration, and I'm for some probably type of reform, but I tell you what, how much is the reform going to cost? We don't know. What's it going to entail? And see, I don't mean to keep going back to this, but it seems like Washington, D.C. is very good at kicking the can down the road on just about every issue out there. And like I said, I don't deal well with dysfunction, and they seem to be very, very dysfunctional on this. But can we first deal with border security? Everybody wants to talk about everything else. Maybe it's because I'm a simple Marine. Secure the border, fence, aviation assets, boots on the ground. Then let's have a discussion about the folks we have here and the folks that we want to come in legally. But maybe I'll find out when I get to D.C. that things aren't that simple, but to me it seems that simple.
And you talk about not liking dysfunction. I was hoping maybe you could talk about your background or why you have that approach to life.
Because my approach to life has been, not survival is the wrong word, but, so we grew up, my parents grew up poor. I was the first guy to grow up with running water. You know, so my parents, my mother didn't even finish, she was an immigrant, didn't even finish high school. So it was all about education. It was the only way to get ahead. So they got themselves moved up into the middle class, the working class. Okay, so they went from no plumbing into the working class, middle class, and they wanted better for their two children, which my brother and I. So all my life I worked really hard to be functional, to go to school. So I got a double major in chemistry and biology. Went on to law school, opened up my own small business at 29. And in the Marine Corps, there is no room for dysfunction. There is no room for mission non-accomplishment. So you get 2 times at promotion, from second lieutenant all the way to colonel. And if you fail, you know, you're thrown out. So it's about survival. So yeah, from second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel to colonel, I had to be functional. And not only that, I had to lead. And I had to get things done. Otherwise, I would have never succeeded there. And I certainly would have never succeeded in business. And I got to tell you, there were times where it was rough. I mean, I opened up my law firm. I left the big firm. I had no clients, 29 years old. I opened it up. 2 years later, the Gulf War broke out. And they weren't that. And I got activated for that. And I came back, I started it again. And there were times I went without pay to make sure my employees got paid. Things are much better now, but that's a long-winded answer to my lack of dysfunction.
Megan's question is not to suggest that we endorse dysfunction. We're with you on that.
Right, no, no, in fact, I didn't think she did. I just,
Yeah.
my biography, my life story is about getting things done. And that's why I have such a difficult time with Washington. And quite honestly, my only experience in politics was up at the State House as a state senator in 2010. We got things done. I mean, I was one of 19 Republicans in a 24-member Senate. We got things done. People may not have agreed with what we did, but we got things done. So my only experience with politics is getting things done as well.
Before we move on to that, so you're elected to the U.S. House. You're a freshman congressman coming in. What are you going to do to make things work in a dysfunctional Congress?
Well, the first thing I think is we got to get rid of this career politician mentality. So here we go with term limits. Now I know I'm going to have an uphill battle with that, right? Because most people want to stay down there, I guess, because they stay, they make more money, they have more influence. I'm going down a term limit myself. There'll be a new Congress. I hope there will be some like-minded individuals like me who want term limits themselves, who feel like George Washington felt, we're coming down here, we're getting something done, then we're going back home to the farm. So that's what I intend to do. And, geez, I hope folks down there are going to have a stomach for it, this new breed, new crop. Thank goodness it's every 2 years, so we are going to have some new people down there. And I'm hoping there'll be people like me that are 54 years old. I have no desire to have a career in politics. I intend to get something done and come home. I'll be 60 years old even if I get elected all 3 times.
So going down there and saying, I'm only staying here for a maximum of 6 years, that's going to change the culture?
It'll change the culture in that I would assume that I don't have to kowtow to special interests, I hope. Well, I don't intend to. But take this race right now, if you take a look at the primary right now. So I've raised 80% of my money from New Hampshire. Folks that believe in me, trust me, think I'm the right guy for the job. Take a look at my primary opponent, my major one anyway, Mary Linda Garcia. Where's her money coming from? D.C. special interests. Now, there might be a variety of reasons. Here's what I think the reason is. She's been a career politician up until now. That she probably wants to be a career politician. Well, if you're a special interest group, well, why wouldn't you want to latch on to someone that's going to be there a long time so that you can influence and get your influence into Congress and into America? So I don't know if I'm making sense, but essentially what I'm saying is the longer you're down there, the worse things get with these people, in my opinion. If you go down there and you're only going to be there for 3 terms, I could do whatever I want to do, whatever's best for the country. Rather than worried about, am I going to be here for a while and continue to get reelected, and do I need to pay attention to that special interest to make sure they take care of me in the long term?
So are lobbyists a bad thing?
I think lobbyists can be a bad thing. I don't want to disparage the field, and I'll tell you why. And I'm getting hit on this right now in the primary, so here I go again. They were helpful at the State House because we didn't have a staff. And so I use lobbyists as an educational tool at times on issues. We're like, can you help me out with this one issue? Give me the education piece on it. The good thing about it at the State House, it's a volunteer position, and so the money doesn't influence, as I think it does down in Washington, D.C. So will I talk to lobbyists? I will talk to everyone, but you know, one thing I've learned by just watching D.C., watching things work down there, is there's a lot of special interest with a lot of special interest money, and more so than you would find at the State House. Probably a lot more.
Switching gears to foreign policy, currently, just hoping you could share your thoughts on that, as well as the current situation in Iraq. I know the airstrikes have been authorized, as well as we were hoping you could speak to Israel-Gaza and the Russia-Ukraine situation.
Would be delighted to. I've served in Iraq in 2004. Been to Ukraine. Been to Russia, so a lot of the places that we're talking about, I've been there, courtesy of the Marine Corps, I should say. Certainly I'm not on a vacation. So let's start with Iraq. We've got Americans in Iraq right now, and we've got to make sure we protect them. I don't have the intelligence the president's getting. I trust the president to an extent, I hope, to do the right thing. I hope airstrikes, we're not just doing airstrikes to do airstrikes, because that accomplishes nothing except ticking a bunch of people off. So if airstrikes are done to protect Americans and to prevent genocide, and that's what they're truly for, then on a case-by-case basis, I'll trust the President's judgment.
What about the rest of the world that's on fire right now?
Oh, I know. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Let's go to Israel. That's probably the second
Yeah.
hardest spot. I'm disappointed in the administration. I think there is too much daylight between President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Israel is our only friend in the Middle East, the only democracy there, and for us to be second-guessing them, folks. And I have a personal, I guess, bone on. I've been under rocket attack in Iraq. You can't imagine, unless you've been under rocket attack, you cannot Monday morning quarterback someone who has been. And so these folks are trying to defend themselves. And I know there's a lot of stories out there, but Israel is trying to defend themselves. They've been under constant rocket attack. And for this president and the administration at times to second guess their judgment, to me, has been very disheartening. If we were getting bombed here in Keene, I can tell you right now, the reaction would be even worse, I think, than what you hear from the Israelis.
But in the case of with the Israeli and Gaza, and it's just been going on for so long, how do you stop something like that?
Well, the first thing, the president could be a lot more engaged, I think, with the leadership there. And we've got to know who our friends are and who our enemies are. First of all, we know Hamas. Hamas's charter is the destruction of Israel. Well, that is a non-starter. That's just a complete non-starter. So let's work with other world leaders, especially in the area, to put pressure on Hamas. But that's just not going to work. You can't negotiate with a person who wants to destroy you. The Palestinian people, great people. People, generally speaking, are great people. Even in Iraq, those folks want what we want. They want the right things for their children. They want an education for their children. They want a job to go to. And they want to come home with a paycheck at the end of the week. That's what the average person wants. But you take a group like Hamas and the terrorist groups like them, hard to negotiate.
At this time, what do you view as the U.S. role in the situation over there?
Be a leader. Be a leader, be a coalition builder. When I was in Iraq, people may agree or disagree with President Bush, but the man could lead and the man could put together a coalition. That's what the president is supposed to do. Act strong, go with the Teddy Roosevelt thing, as far as I'm concerned. Speak softly and carry a big stick. This president seems to be talking too much and walking around with a twig. I mean, if you take that red line in Syria, okay, then don't make the threat if you're not going to carry out the consequences of the threat. So he draws the red line, they cross the red line, and there are no consequences. So you either draw the red line and you make the consequences, or you don't draw the red line.
What would be the U.S.'s big stick in Gaza?
Well, I'm not saying there has to be a big stick in Gaza. I'm just saying that you can't talk smack, for lack of a better word, and not back it up. Maybe you just shouldn't be talking. So the way I look at the way we deal with Gaza and with Israel is we make sure that Israel knows that we're her friend, because that's just creating weakness. When folks like Hamas and these terrorist groups see that daylight between Israel and the president, they're going to be like, see, America doesn't like them anyway, so we might as well just continue with the bombing runs or the rockets, and they're not going to get help from the U.S. and the U.S. allies.
Based on your experience in Iraq, where there was a goal of the whole, the second round in Iraq was to use a term that's often used, nation building. Is that an appropriate role for the United States in places like Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere in the Middle East?
No, we should not be nation builders, and we should not be the world's policemen. Now, when I was in Iraq, I mean, there was some nation building, but I was there in 2004, and which was probably, well, if you look at the death toll, the most dangerous time in Iraq. So there was some nation building going on, but most of it was just fighting a bunch of insurgents. I mean, they were shooting rockets into, our base and at us, and we were trying to prevent the insurgency and get a brand new government off the ground. I mean, when I got there in beginning of July, we had just handed the country back over to Iraq, and we were helping them, you're right, form a nation, get it up, but unfortunately, there were a lot of bad people over there doing bad things, trying to prevent that from happening. So we were actively engaged in making sure that they would not cause the ruin of the new Iraq.
So should we continue on in Afghanistan? Are you?
I think it's time to come home in Afghanistan. It's time for the Afghans to do their own thing. We've stayed there, we've taught them, we've helped them, we've aided them, and now it is time for them to find their way. There is a limit to what America can do, and I think we've reached our limit. In Afghanistan.
So after more than a decade there, indications are strong that if we leave, the Taliban might well come back to power. Will that have been worth spending the lives and the time and the money to be there for a decade?
Well, I can't say I assume the premise of your question that the Taliban will take over. I don't know. I don't know if any of us know. I think it's time. I think maybe once you take the training wheels off the bike, maybe the Afghans will finally realize, you know what, we are on our own now. And we've got to step up. There's some great people, I'm sure, that are in the military there that will get into elected office there. It's time for them to find their way. And I'm hoping they will find their way. We've been there long enough. We've given enough assistance. Hopefully, they will do what's necessary to keep the Taliban out of power. That's what I'm hoping.
Is there a role for this country in the Russia-Ukraine dispute?
Not boots on the ground. So that's a no for me. That's a non-starter. What should be a starter for the president is a little bit more engagement in world affairs, such as with President Putin. So I think President Putin looks at President Obama as like, I can do anything I want with this guy. Because I've seen what he did with the Red Line in Syria. See how weak he is in world affairs. And I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. And that is not the place, that is not the way the presidency should be run, unfortunately.
So what would be the way to show him that he can't?
Well, it's a little bit late now. I know it's easy to say that, but I know
Well, even going back to the day after Flight 17 was shot down, or whenever you feel the time was right, what would be the move?
The move, I think, was way before then. In other words, I think we need to even go farther back. Like I said, I hate to keep going back to that red line in Syria, but that, to me, was a defining moment of the presidency, where the world looked, and he blinked. And so, from then on, how do you get your credibility back? If you continue to show weak leadership, non-engagement in world events, then that void will be filled by bad people wanting to do bad things. Because the reason why we have peace, or why we've had peace in world events for so long, is we've been the superpower. We've been the guy you don't want to mess with. And now, apparently you can mess with us and there will be no consequences.